Welcome to this week's BitShares DEV Hangout. This recording is brought to you by the Beyond Bitcoin crew. We welcome all BitShares members to join us weekly and discuss the latest news, updates, and developments. If you'd like to participate in our next meeting, then please join us live on Mumble every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Did you know the Beyond Bitcoin show now has a registered delegate? Please consider voting if you find our Hangouts and recordings useful. The delegate name to vote for is fuzzy.beyondbitcoin. Again, that's fuzzy.beyondbitcoin. The Beyond Bitcoin crew would like to send out a big thank you to everyone who's already voted and allowing us the opportunity to serve the BitShares ecosystem and our valued community members. So once again, welcome and please enjoy the show.
Welcome everybody to a Beyond Bitcoin Hangout with Bytemaster. This is a special edition one, meaning that we are doing it at a different time than normal. So we probably have some attendees here who are not used to showing up for the live Hangouts, probably listen to them. For those of you who are not familiar with how we normally run through this, we let Bytemaster open up with some comments about what's going on behind the scenes, and we open it up to community questions. Of course, I am a loudmouth community member myself, so I always have plenty of questions, but if you feel like you would like to ask one, speak up. Please be willing to take your turn and respect others, and if you are uncomfortable speaking out loud, please try to post it in the chat box below on the left-hand corner of the Mumble client, and I will do my best to reach out and ask it for you. If it's one final caveat with that is if it's too far off topic, it might take a while for me to get to it, and I might not get to it depending on how the conversation flows. So with that said, Bytemaster, would you like to get started talking about this, some of the stuff that you wanted to talk about today regarding the launch of DPost 2.0?
Thank you. I'd say this is more than just the launch of DPost 2.0. If you view DPost as just the consensus protocol. Today we're announcing BitShares 2.0, which has been completely rewritten from the ground up with performance in mind, and it has a slew of new features currently available at bitshares.github.io. It will soon be available at bitshares.org once the DNS update propagates. So there are so many new features. I think many people here have been overloaded by the sheer amount of reading. I wasn't kidding several weeks ago when I told you that I was writing pages and pages and pages of documentation. Today you finally get to see the results of all that work.
There is a lot of stuff that I know I read through. There were issues regarding, I believe you were talking about, of course, the transaction scalability, which we've talked about before in previous Hangouts. But one thing I don't think that we covered too much was the migration. And I hate to interrupt you on this, but this is a point that I really think might be pretty important for us to ask. Is there anything that users need to do or abstain from doing during the process of this to make sure that it goes as smoothly as possible? Or are there any bugs that you guys foresee potentially popping up that that users should expect so they don't get freaked out?
Our goal is to make sure that everyone can move their stake over without having to do anything whatsoever. We will, however, recommend that for ease of migration that users transfer all their funds to themselves for each asset. That will help combine things in the new system. Also recommend that if you do register any new accounts on BitShares between now and when 2.0 is officially launched, that you do not attempt to register what we call premium names. These are names that are less than 8 characters and don't contain any numbers. These names are going to go for a much higher price because names are now transferable. We're going to grandfather in everyone who had an account registered through today. The faucet has been upgraded to prevent you from signing up a new account with a premium name between now and then. If you do happen to sign up for an account that is less than 8 characters and has no numbers in it between June 8th and launch, then we will prefix your account when we migrate it over. We just don't want anyone flooding the BitShares network trying to squat on all the names before the price rise can take effect. Other than that, there's not anything you should really have to do to migrate it. You'll be able to export the private keys from the current BitShares wallet and import them into the new wallet and have all your stake. All balances, all assets will be migrated. All bid assets will be migrated. So you don't have to do anything there. Short positions will be migrated. Because this is a 1-for-1 upgrade, we expect less than 24 hours of downtime between the snapshot and the launch of the new system. That the collateral requirements and pricing for the bid assets should be unchanged. Because we're given at least 30 days notice, all shorts should have rolled over. So if you're unhappy with the bid asset 2.0 proposal and you're currently short, then you'll have at least 30 days from the time we announce to exit your position voluntarily. Otherwise, you'll de facto accept the new terms of bid assets.
Just real quick to interject, if you don't mind. Once upon a time asked a question that I was actually preparing to ask myself. He asks here, in quotes, transfer assets to yourself. Do you mean by that transfer it to your account or to your account name from external exchanges? And
as always, with snapshots, you want to make sure that your funds don't stay on the exchange. We're going to be working with the exchanges to make sure that they continue to honor everything and that they're ready to upgrade. So I don't believe that should be a problem. But for best results, withdraw it to your own account. The reason for transferring all your funds to yourself is to have them all under one key rather than divided among, perhaps dozens of keys. Under BitShares 2.0, every balance record or key in BitShares will be its own account. So it's going to work much closer to how Bitcoin works, where every key is its own account. So your balances will be directly tied to your account name. So if you're using Titan, we might not know that. So your funds will be under some public key address, but under the new system, it will be tied to your name. And that just has to do with, in order to achieve the performance we want, and the fact that stealth addresses were not scalable.
Sounds good. One question that I have that I would like to bring up, rather, are there any exchanges by name that are honoring the share dropping? This is something that I would like to do just to give credit to those exchanges and let people know who are new to the BitShares ecosystem. Because those exchanges are doing a lot of extra work to ensure that this happens for their users, and not every exchange does, right?
CCEDK will do it because we have got a close relationship with them. And the Chinese exchanges that have honored share drops in the past will likely do that as well.
So we have BTC 38 and BTR.
Right, we haven't talked with them before this announcement.
Sure.
To find out for sure. So we'll find out more information about that at this time.
Paulinex is another one that historically has done so. I don't know if there are any others that I'm aware of, but I'll let you go on.
We've been discussing for past several months about Titan slowly being phased out or not being an option. There's a lot of reasons for why we are doing that. Part of it has to do with just achieving the performance we want to achieve. The other is it was providing a false sense of privacy. And despite everything we were doing, voting was revealing your account. And if you're not voting, you're not helping to secure the network. And because you didn't have direct control over how the wallet was combining the addresses, you really didn't have direct control over how your identity leaked out. So we decided to stop trying to automate the privacy and end up, giving someone, creating a system that's harder to use and still doesn't provide privacy, and instead giving you direct control. If you want privacy, you can register many different accounts through the faucet and then make sure that you never transfer funds directly between them.
So you would want to ensure that you don't register them from the same IP address, have something like a VPN set up, something like that.
Right, because what a lot of people first instinct is, well, I'll just register some accounts and I'll pay for it all from one account. Well, now it's all tied together at the registration step because they were all funded from the same balance. So
it says here, Riverhead says, so your wallet will look like the Bitcoin wallet for some balances compared to what it currently does.
Correct. When you initially import it, we'll probably use first bits type naming system for all the addresses that we bring in. So you'll have much shorter addresses for all existing balance records.
I'm sorry about that. I just wanted to get a couple things straight because not everybody who's a user understands even really the basics of, what big data can do. I would like to believe that most of the people in the crypto community are more in that area where they're more aware of that stuff. But, we want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to learn these little things,
A while back, I participated in the Netflix Grand Challenge, and just processing the data, I could group all the Star Trek movies and all the Star Wars movies and all these movies that were related just by how people voted and not knowing anything about their names or anything else, just knowing movie numbers and voting patterns and user IDs. I was able to group all these things together. So people can do the exact same thing with blockchain just by monitoring all the data. So
isn't that just metadata?
Yeah, it's all metadata. And it's amazing what metadata will tell you about something. Someone asked the question, is it still possible to have funds in an unregistered account? The answer is no. If you want the equivalent of an unregistered account, register the account to the hash of some random characters. There's actually a reason for that, and that has to do with the way the new protocol is structured. If you looked at the performance and scalability discussions on the website, you will see that our transactions are only 100 bytes, whereas Bitcoin's transactions are 250 bytes. And that's because we are now referring a transfer operation refers to account IDs rather than addresses, which means that we're using 3 bytes instead of 24 or 32 bytes to reference accounts. So when you look at the permissions in the system, all permissions are based upon key IDs, which are a couple bytes rather than a hash of the key, which is 32 bytes. This means that any key or permission in the system has to be registered with the blockchain before it can be used in a transfer or a balance. And that's a big part of how we got to the scalability that we did, because we can process through all these IDs at blazing speeds. But when you try to do the same exact thing that we're doing right now, where all your identifiers are 32 byte hashes, and you're looking them up in hash tables and other things, it drives your performance into the ground. So you need to register the keys, but once it's registered, it doesn't have to be registered to any type of meaningful name.
So it can be to an avatar name like Fuzzy.
Or it can just be to random characters, yes. If you think about it right now, transferring to an unregistered account is simultaneous create account and transfer in one transaction. So in theory, you can still do that, but after you've transferred to it, it's now registered under the hash of the address, right? So it's the same basic principle.
Now, this is since we're in that privacy realm, and it seems like most of the community right now is talking about that. Vor asks, so someone could implement a mixing service application if the worst comes to worst.
Yes, any solution that they're using with Bitcoin can be used here. We haven't given up on privacy. You should, be looking for more privacy solutions from us in the future. But we're not prepared to talk about those stuff right at this point in time.
Now, while we're on this topic real quick, you said something about, and this is a little bit off topic, but really not. And I think you guys will understand what I'm asking when I ask it. There was a poll on the forums, and it was actually on the Bitcoin Talk forums regarding which protocol you would use if you wanted to switch over to something. And it showed next to each of these coins the transactions per second. BitShares, of course, had 100,000 transactions per second, which we know is feasibly much higher once everything is in place and all the bugs are fixed and all that good stuff. But it said somewhere on there, and I won't name the coin because I don't want to cause a flame war or anything, but I do want to approach this and ask you, have you heard of, you're familiar with ring signatures? There was a coin that they said because of the ring signatures and the way that it works, that it can be unbounded, unlimited in its transactions per second. Do you know anything about that? And is it something that would keep the anonymity truly intact? Do you disagree or agree with the statement?
Right. So let's talk about what performance means, right? When we say 100,000 transactions per second, what are we really referring to? And why are we confident that few other systems will be able to come anywhere close to this, particularly if they're using something as computationally intensive as ring signatures? We have identified the bottleneck in blockchains as the single-threaded performance of applying transactions to the global state. Every transaction has the potential to invalidate all transactions that come after it. If you try to apply two transactions at the same time, you need to make sure that they truly are independent of each other. And the costs of determining whether or not two transactions are independent of each other and whether or not they can be applied at the same time, and the cost of synchronizing around the data that they're both going to modify, such as current supplies or fees, and there's some shared data that it's modified with every transaction. It's really, really difficult to do this stuff in parallel. You can do things like multi-threaded signature verification, but assume all signature verification was free. How fast can you go? And that's what we really focused on, is how fast can we make that inner loop, the parts that cannot be accelerated through parallelism. And that's transferring money from one person to another. It's debit at one account, add to another account, make sure you save and undo history in case there's a
You just cut out. In case there's a...
When you match orders, you're affecting many other accounts, right? So all order matching affects the global state, and you can't do order matching in parallel. It's inherently sequential. At least you can't do it in parallel with a traditional order book style system. So we decided to embrace that. You can use the lessons we learned from LMAX. LMAX is a centralized exchange that is able to do 6 million transactions per second in a single thread, and they shared all about how they achieved it. And we're applying similar techniques in our design, which means a heavy focus on single-threaded performance. What this implies is that you don't want to have the core business logic, the business logic that determines signature verification, the business logic that determines which account you're addressing, like using a hash to look it up. You don't want expensive cryptographic operations to be in that core thread. And you also don't want it to be done in a single thread with every transaction depending on every other transaction. You want to minimize the number of computations you have to do to update one balance, subtract a balance from one user and add it to another user, to match orders, and to do just about anything. That means you want to eliminate all cryptographic operations from that core business thread. You want to eliminate all script evaluation from that core thread, which means if you build a blockchain that is entirely interpreted, it's going to run much, much slower, orders of magnitude slower for doing the exact same thing, simply by being inside a virtual machine. And it means you want to do things like use IDs and so on and so forth. So when you see other coins out there talking about how fast they can theoretically go, you'll find that there's a lot of focus on technologies that only,
this is where you cut out, technologies that only.
All right. So all the other cryptocurrency projects out there that start talking about theoretical performance, they've got these gigantic hash identifiers on all accounts, and they're doing all this computation, particularly if they're script-based systems, in the main evaluation thread. And if they do have some amazing performance numbers where it's very distributed, the technology is usually limited to only being used for coin transfer. Now, I'm transferring some value from one person to another. If you couldn't apply the same techniques for general consensus over things like markets or smart contracts. There's just so many things that you can't do in a general purpose way. So there are a lot of interesting things out there. I think that we've focused on a solution that allows us to do general purpose smart contracts, complex smart contracts in an efficient manner, and that can scale for a long time to come before we have to start considering other approaches. Hopefully, the CPUs will advance their single-threaded performance at a rate that can keep ahead of adoption. But yeah, I'm not too concerned about the other technologies out there. They're just not flexible enough.
So you see, for maybe perhaps straight issue, like sending of value of currency of a coin, being potentially possible, but they wouldn't be able to add in all of the bells and whistles that BitShares is going to have without significant work and maybe a complete overhaul.
Correct, especially because when you use hashes and globally unique identifiers, basically content adjustable accounts, you're automatically hurting your performance. You're automatically increasing your bandwidth size, whereas our account IDs are short integers, and they're assigned sequentially. It keeps everything very efficient, both for the computer and for the network.
Mr. Big has a slightly off, well, not an off topic with regard to this entire hangout, but he wants to ask, can we estimate the launch time very roughly 3 months?
Like we've established, we don't want to set any particular launch dates. At this point in time, I can tell you where we are. We have most features implemented. We have most features tested with close to 90% code coverage on the existing code. There are a lot of corner cases that still need to be tested. So most of what we will be doing between now and launch will be testing. The user interface is probably the thing that's lacking right now, but we've got the largest team we've ever had working on the user interface. I would like to call out SVK and Kronos, Valentine, and James. They've all been doing great work in that area. The new architecture makes their job much, much easier. I cannot describe for you guys the significance of the improvements we've made in that realm, but SVK is well aware of it, and any developers who look at how it's designed will be well aware of it. It's easier on the server end and the client end. We won't have synchronization issues between the two. A lot of bugs in the user interface were a result of the architecture that made it unsustainable. But the new architecture is very clean. So we've cleaned up the interface architecture just as much as we've cleaned up the backend architecture. And that should result in much faster development of the user interface and much more consistent development. Rather than developing two different UIs, we're still focusing on one UI that's hosted wallet. We're using code generation to make sure all the serialization is synchronized between the C++ and the JavaScript, which greatly reduces a large number of the errors that we had. In theory, it's possible to do every single transaction supported by BitShares 2.0 from JavaScript today. So it's just a matter of getting the forms in place to allow the user to input the data and then displaying the data. And we have working user interface right now that allows you to transfer coins from person to person. The market interface is being rewritten by Kronos, but we have a lot of new features that are going to need expressed, particularly the new account keys and multisig. It's going to be a dramatic improvement in the user interface. So as far as timeline, I'm saying this summer is when the code should be ready. And then it's up to the BitShares community to confirm that the code is at a proper quality and bug-free enough to justify switching from BitShares 0.9 to BitShares 2. We don't want to switch until we're sure that the new system is more robust, more stable, more reliable than the current system. So we don't want to go backwards.
I had somebody who asked me a question. I don't know if they wanted me to name their name, so I'm not going to. But they brought up DevShares and the value of DevShares as it currently stands, and as it has in the past. What do you see the new role for DevShares being, or is there not going to be a role for DevShares in the future?
There'll still be a need for DevShares. Obviously, DevShares is how we're going to test everything in BitShares 2.0. But of course, it'll be a different DevShares than we all know and love.
The only reason I asked was because you guys have tested some things behind the scenes, so I wasn't sure if DevShares was considered the next step of testing, like live testing, and you were testing it on, obviously, a testnet. So I wasn't sure if that was going... When they asked me the question, I really couldn't give an answer, so I wanted to make sure that we clarified that. And one more question that they asked, if I can dig into it real quick, and I'll open up for some community questions too. The new delegated proof of stake BitShares 2.0 will be share dropped on existing holders first off, correct?
Yes, it's going to be 100% migration. There's going to be no reallocation of stake.
Okay. And have you guys as a team talked at all about AGS and PTS and Quixote? And if those would be integrated, maybe AGS as, something that's logged in the chain, a user issue asset that might not be transferable, or it might be PTS might be placed on the chain. Talked at all about it?
We have no interest in doing anything with those at this point. Obviously, it would be a simple matter for anyone with a script to create an asset and pay it out. But you really want to pay the transaction fees to do that? It's probably easier to just keep AGS where it is as a record on the Bitcoin blockchain, and to let PTS do its thing on its current blockchain.
Well, let me go ahead and ask Vor's question real quick. Is there going to be any way of, or when can you contribute to the code?
The code is publicly available right now. Any contributions you make, you can just... The announcement post has a link to the GitHub repository. You can view the code there and contribute.
Thank you. Now, I will put the brakes on my own mouth for a moment, and if anybody has any questions they would like to voice openly, feel free to do so.
And so Thom asked a question, by hosted wallet, does this mean that there will no longer be a full wallet or full blockchain download for clients? The intent is to drive all users toward web-based wallets or light wallets, using the exact same user interface, using the exact same WebSocket protocol. The only difference between the web hosted wallet and a light wallet will be which browser it's in. Is it in your normal browser, or is it in a dedicated browser? Is the code fetched from the server, or is it served locally? That should be the only difference between the two types of wallets that we're going to direct most users toward. When we set a goal for 100,000 transactions per second, and you look at the data rates required for that, that is not something that the average person is going to want or be able to hook up to. Sure, anyone with a data center can do it, but not the average person.
Sure.
Now, if you wanted to hook up to it, you could set up your own VPS or in a server with lots of RAM and a fast internet connection and have your light wallet talk to that server. But when you look at all the platforms we need to target, mobile phones, so on and so forth, that's where we're going. Everything's going to be light wallets. If someone wants to have a full wallet on their own computer, they can use the command line version to download the wallet and point to their own server. We believe that's going to be a niche market. And if you need that level of trustlessness, then go for it. But we're not going to be promoting it.
Tom's asking, will this impact the VPS cost of witness nodes?
When you look at the cost for the same transaction volume you have today, it's going to fall dramatically. The new system uses a fraction of the RAM of BitShares for our current user base and transaction volume. So the only time you'd have to think about scaling your hardware would be when we get to millions of users. We can support 1 million users on the same system that you're using today. So then if we have 1 million users, you can expect that we can afford to pay the witnesses more to upgrade their servers to handle anything as we grow. By the time we get to 100,000 transactions per second, you can expect that you'll need a machine with 72 cores and a tier 1 connection to the internet. That's not unreasonable. It's cheaper than a lot of mining rigs out there. And anyone, the blockchain can easily afford it when we're at those transaction volumes.
So just to clarify for those who have not been checking in quite often enough to keep up to date with this, witnesses in the current scheme are going to basically, the current structure, let's call it that, will be synonymous with what delegates used to be, minus the payouts with respect to like 50 BTS per block. And that will be also that will be separated out into workers, which actually Riverhead asks a question regarding that. Let me find. How will wallet hosts be compensated? Will they be workers?
Wallet hosts are the ones that end up registering most of the users. They're compensated by the referral program.
And that gets into Riverhead's other question, which I promised myself I would get into. We have talked about the referral system in the past, but could we get a brief overview of it or any additional details that we may not have received in the past?
Before we do that, it's up to you guys, of course, but we're kind of talking about delegates and witnesses and the infrastructure of DPoS. So before we go into the witnessing, and before we go into the incentive programs, could we talk about how you see the migration path of DPoS 1 to DPoS 2 in terms of roles and what have you?
All migration paths are thoroughly documented in the new BitShares website. So if you have any questions about how anything in particular is going to migrate, you should be able to find your answers there. If we don't have it answered there, post on the forum, and we'll make sure we update the blog post to answer all of these questions. The short answer is every delegate who is 5% and below as on their pay rate will be migrated as a witness only. Any delegate who is over 5% will be migrated as a witness and a worker, with the worker that makes up for the additional pay. And all the initial delegate positions will be held by, in the new system, delegates have control over proposing changes to the transaction fees or blockchain parameters. Those will initially be held by the developers until they're voted into someone else.
Okay, thank you.
So on to the referral cashback system. This is sort of the centerpiece of BitShares 2.0. And I think it's going to make a huge, huge difference in the viral coefficient of the blockchain. The idea is this. We've got several different types of accounts. Regular user accounts. These accounts are free. They're what you're used to today. These accounts do not qualify for participating in the referral or cashback program, so they pay full transaction fees. These fees will be similar to what you pay for Dwala, probably on the order of 20 cents. Then we have two other types of accounts. One of them is going to be a lifetime member. And when you're a lifetime member, you pay a one-time upgrade fee of about $100. That's what we're targeting right now. Of course, remember, all fees can be changed by delegates. And when that upgrade...
You mean?
No, delegates can propose the change in the fees. The witnesses are neutral.
Okay.
Witnesses have no say over the fee structure or their own pay, other than the fact that they won't do their job if the delegates and stakeholders don't approve high enough compensation for them. All right, so back to the referral program. Every fee, when you're a lifetime member, you get an 80% discount on all fees, which means that a 20-cent fee for a regular user becomes a 4-cent fee after cash back. So that's more like a Bitcoin level transaction fee. And when you're a lifetime member, you can refer other users. And when those users pay their 20-cent fee, you get 80% of that as well until they upgrade. Once they upgrade, then you get $80 from that upgrade fee, 80% of the $100 upgrade fee. And then you no longer get any additional referral income from that user. That user gets their own discounts through their cashback system. This creates a very flat structure. This is not a multi-level marketing system, and it cannot be abused because the users are paying the fee to get the discounts. So it's really just an incentive for anyone who is an above average user of the system to upgrade. And we try to set the upgrade fee to equal the lifetime fees we'd expect someone to pay. So if we start seeing lifetime fees increase, we'll increase the cost of becoming a lifetime member. At the end of the day, the target is to have half of all accounts be lifetime members. These are the people that would be above average usage. And the other half will be pay-as-you-go users, and they'd pay the full transaction fees because they find that cheaper. That would be the general goal of the pricing structure. Now, that's the lifetime membership. Now, we also have another concept, which is the annual subscription membership. In this case, you pay a $20 fee, and you get 50% off all your transactions for a year. And you get 50% of the referral income from anyone you refer. The other 30% goes to the lifetime member who is above you. So that's the three different levels: regular user, annual subscription, lifetime member. And every fee that you get in a cashback, it must vest for 1 year. That's a feature I didn't want to have in there. I wanted it to be immediately available. But after analysis, we identified a way that the incentive structure could be compromised or abused if we did not require vesting on all income received from the rewards program. So that's the overview in a nutshell. Of course, there's more information on BitShares.org. If you have any questions about it, I'll answer them now.
Well, somebody was talking about, asked about gateways, and we talked about this a little bit on Friday, but as everybody who was there knows, and some of the people at least the people who've read my thread that I posted to the forums are aware, we kind of shut that hangout down a little bit early because there was a lot of stuff that we wanted to dig into, or at least that I wanted to dig into, that we would get into here on Monday. And really didn't want to put you under pressure to, because in the past we've had times when we've said, there's been pressure to say too much, right? But you talked a little bit about CCEDK, and I know that you mentioned them briefly here in this hangout. Could you give a little bit of an overview of that real quick?
CCEDK is working with us very closely to be our number one fiat gateway for US dollars and euros. So I encourage everyone to support them and start providing liquidity on their exchange, because there's a lot that we can do with CCEDK in the future, especially with their MasterCard.
Roadscape asked a question, so I'll hold back. Can transactions have public memos, encrypted memos?
Yes, it can have both.
Wow. So I can send an encrypted memo to somebody else, and any third party who's trying to read it will not be able to.
Correct. CCEDK requires you to know your customer validation on all fiat deposits or withdrawals.
What's the character limit on the encrypted messaging?
There's no limit, but you will pay a transaction fee proportional to the number of bytes.
Thanks. It's actually just a little bit of a follow-up there. Is this basically like that encryption is solid, so that this is encrypted email? This is huge.
I think it'd be very, very expensive encrypted email. It'd be encrypted email with similar postage to snail mail.
Okay.
But very valuable for passing passwords or something like that to a multisig, a person who's a member of a multisig account or something to that effect.
Yeah, that shouldn't be necessary to pass any passwords or anything like that over the system.
Oh, well, thank you for letting us know that.
So yeah, the entire system, we covered this earlier, but multisig, multi-sign is more advanced than any other blockchain out there. I suggest you check out the website for details on that. We covered that earlier in this session. But all accounts support it by default. And not only that, but we have proposed transactions, which means you can propose one account transfer funds to another account, and all the multi-sig participants just have to click approve.
MFTZO is asking if we can talk a little bit more regarding how secure the web wallets versus the full wallets are, which, considering the topic, this might not be a bad place. I mean, you've basically mentioned in this discussion that we're gravitating more toward a web user type of interface that will span across multiple different types of devices. So I guess this would be a question that's probably a very valid one for the average everyday user.
All right, so let's talk about security in general. Your private keys will be more secure than ever, especially when you use two-factor authentication and the multi-sig systems we have now. With things like withdrawal permissions, you can set daily spending limits on particular accounts. So all these factors mean that from a private key, multi-sig perspective, it will be more secure than ever. A light wallet or a hosted wallet, you're basically downloading the wallet every single time you visit the website. If the website is compromised, then when you visit the website, they could download code that causes you to reveal your private keys to the server. Now, if it's a good server and it's hosted securely, you're fine. If you never log in while the server is compromised, you're also fine. So the only people that are vulnerable in the event that the server gets compromised are those who actively log in. So in theory, you should only be vulnerable if you log in and unlock your wallet. Otherwise, your keys are still encrypted locally. A lot of this stuff can be mitigated by having browser plugins or a separate downloadable browser-based app.
You mean like NoScript or something like Key Scrambler?
No, that's not what I was referring to. I was thinking like basically a program that's nothing other than a wrapper for Chrome or WebKit. Kind of like the current wallets hosted. It has its own web browser. In that case, you're not downloading the wallet code every single time, so your keys are secure there. But you are trusting the server to tell you the public keys of the people that you're going to be transferring funds to. So in that case, you're only vulnerable in the event that you're transferring funds to someone else and the server lies about who you're sending it to. All of this can be completely mitigated by, well, not completely, but mostly mitigated by having your downloaded light wallet checked with multiple servers. And it should even be possible to have a hosted wallet that checks with multiple independent servers for all blockchain queries. And if anything's out of sync, then you're fine there. But it boils down to it's at least as secure as most of the current banking infrastructure. Obviously, there's a balance between ease of use and security, between scalability and security. The new system is designed to make it possible to have some validation that transactions are included in the blockchain. And of course, once you've downloaded data about accounts and certain keys, you don't have to fetch that information every time. We are implementing a lot of features, though, that make it easy to verify out of band that you're sending to the right person. So that's a long answer, but I think it's a reasonable compromise.
Well, it generally seems like it boils down to what you've talked about in the past. We really need to ensure that if you really care about privacy, it's going to be a lot of manual work. Your team can make it easier on people, but you can't make it as easy as, say, giving this service over, connecting up with a third-party service.
Let me give you the short answer. This is not about privacy, but this is more about security. If you're using a hosted wallet, you should almost certainly use a separate independent two-factor authentication provider as a multisig signer on every transfer. So even if the wallet provider is compromised and your private keys for your account are compromised, they still haven't compromised the two-factor authentication, which is completely independent. So as long as the two-factor auth provider is different from the wallet provider, you're good. Now, and it's even possible to have three-factor authentication, mostly automated so you don't see it. It worked very much like your current banking system. If you're sending less than $100, it might allow it to go through. If you're doing more than some threshold you define, it might require you to verify a text message or use Google Auth or some of these other systems that banks use. And when you do that, you don't have to worry about the security of a single hosted wallet provider. In fact, it's probably more secure than downloading the blockchain yourself. Having multi-sig, two-factor, three-factor authentication, there's no replacement for that when it comes to the security of your funds.
This is a huge step because, like you said, I mean, if we're looking at going to an enterprise level for transaction processing, and we know all the other features that are coming.
Yeah. So some people have asked the question, is this going to allow the website to be centralized or DDoSed? The answer is that we expect there to be many, many different hosted wallet providers, and that all of these wallet exchange interfaces will be independent, because that's the primary way that the referral system kicks in. If you want to get the most out of the referral program, you set up a hosted wallet and you direct users to your wallet, and it becomes its own faucet and it registers all the users and you make all your money. So the more users you can attract to your wallet, the larger percentage of all the transaction fees you're going to acquire. So we do not expect BitShares.org to be a central point. In fact, once there is sufficient decentralization of wallet providers, BitShares.org will probably cease to provide this service.
Just real quick, somebody mentioned earlier on, and we didn't cover it, and I know that you talked to Talent from the Moonstone project and BitSapphire somewhat often, and they were asking regarding the status of that. Do you have any details regarding whether they have been able to start working on making the Moonstone wallet work with the BitShares 2.0?
We've been talking with them for a couple of weeks now. They are informed of all the features. They know about almost everything we announced here, and they were very, very happy with what we released here. They have a whole new business model, a whole new way of raising money now. So I think that everything here is good for them. The API upgrades are good for them. Even if they have to rework some stuff, they'll probably save more time and money in the long run with these changes than if we hadn't changed anything. So I think we're good there as far as working with them. Some people have asked some other questions about the market engine. I'd like to address that real quick. Orders are now processed as they are included in the block. and they are now like a traditional exchange with a traditional limit order. No more, you get what you ask for. You can place an order and walk the book and get the best deal all the way up the book. So if you like the way traditional markets work, you understand how they work, it works the exact same way here. Not only that, we are now using ratios, for setting all prices. No more fixed point rounding errors. So everybody should, regardless of which orientation you like to view the market, it should make perfect sense to you.
Could you speak briefly to the authentication model and whether or not the new system will provide for the same level of wallet authentication or similar that was provided for the BitShares Talk login that Gamey was working on?
So the BTS URLs that pop up the wallet and ask you to authenticate your account depend upon the user having an application installed on their computer. And quite frankly, we're trying to move away from that because most users don't want to install anything, which means that it's going to be a hit or miss. Particularly, I've got a BitShares account. They click the link. They don't have the wallet installed. It doesn't work. So we've temporarily deprecated that particular feature until we can figure out a solution that works well with hosted wallets.
MFTZO actually has a question that I was about to ask before the others spoke up regarding, he says here, can we talk about the economics more of the new system? Incentives to short bit assets, hold BTS, hold bit assets, etc. And let's add into that bond markets, because bond markets is a new thing that really caught my eye.
All right. So the incentive in the new system is designed to be profitable. It's designed to have the cost of user acquisition to be below the lifetime value of each user. It means that in the long run, it should be deflationary. There is a fixed supply and a fixed spending limit. And as long as fees collected are higher than the spending limit, we are okay. And with the referral incentive structure in place, it should bring most of the future fees into the present. So we should have users prepaying their fees by upgrading their accounts rather than collecting it over the course of years. With the referral program, it also means we should be getting a lot of economic incentives to migrate users in bulk. For merchants to say, I accept BitShares, and if you pay with BitShares and I refer you, I can get all kinds of extra money on the sale. It should have a dramatic impact on user adoption and the network effect of the system as a whole. So you want to own BitShares because it should appreciate as a result of being a profitable system on the whole. We are moving away from the concept that BTS bit asset collateral is a driving force for appreciation. It does create demand, but it's equal and opposite demand. So I suspect that, we don't exactly, it's not clear how it all plays into the demand structure. But of course, the more demand there is to hold BTS, the better. The new bit asset model creates a lot of new incentives for users to create their own bit assets with their own price feed semantics and advertise those bit assets and gain users to make the market in those assets. There's a lot of incentives for doing private bit assets. It is now possible to create a bit asset backed by another bit asset, which should dramatically increase the predictability of the markets.
So this will tighten the peg for all of the primary assets that are being utilized as backing.
That is correct. Under the new system, all BitUSD will have a value of at least $1 plus the value of the option contract for basically the forced settle option. What that means is that companies like CCEDK can accept BitUSD to MasterCard payments directly without having to have any qualifications or extra fees in there, because that premium should be more than enough to cover the cost. It means merchants can accept it without having to look at the price. And it means that traders have a lot more reliability and liquidity around BitUSD. So we try to increase the liquidity at $1 And of course, all the parameters are tunable, which means the network can respond to changing circumstances. The network can try all the different options out and find out what works. Let me address another economic issue with dilution. We have taken all the dilution that BitShares would ever have, which would take its supply up to 3.7 billion shares, and put it into a reserve pool of 1.2 billion. And all fees collected go into the reserve pool, and each day there's a spending limit of how fast funds can come out of the reserve pool, which is 5 BTS per second, which is 50 BTS per block, which is the current rate limit of funds coming out of the pool. This keeps a closed system with a predictable supply. The workers in the system, they can be voted for a task. There are two types of workers. One type actually does work and keeps the money. The other type returns the funds back to the reserve pool. And the stakeholders have direct control over how much is spent on any given day. And the system should be sustainable as long as the reserve pool doesn't go to zero, which would, even if you had no income from fees, would take over 8 years.
So we have some time to figure out that it's a problem and redirect ourselves. Is what you're saying.
Right.
So our bad if we allow that to happen.
Right. So the other economic feature in the system is the bond market. The bond market allows you to pledge, use any asset in the system as collateral to borrow another asset at interest for a minimum period of time to a maximum period of time. And if you repay the loan with interest, you get your collateral back. If you don't, you forfeit the collateral. So it's kind of like borrowing money against your house. If you pay it off, you get your house back. If you don't pay it off, the bank gets the house. Same principle. The only difference is that if the house falls in value, too bad. The bank can't come after you for more. It's a combination of a loan with an option on it. That simplifies it dramatically. It allows the bond system to function without having to do margin calls.
And one of the specific questions regarding the bond markets was regarding the interest rates. Could you dig into that a little bit?
Interest rates are set on each user. So the bond market has two things. You can make an offer to lend and an offer to borrow, and you can set your own terms for what the interest rate is and what the collateral rate is and the term periods. You'll be able to go see all the offers for the type of asset and collateral you're looking for and borrow it. The economic effect is you can now short anything against anything. You can even borrow BTS to short BTS, all without creating new BTS.
That's huge. I mean, this is something that's I honestly didn't see coming. So this is part of, I'm assuming it's kind of bundled in with the BitAssets 2.0 type of system.
BitUSD is created, as always. You short it into existence. It requires just 200% collateral instead of 300%, equal amount from buyer and seller. Of course, other people can create private versions of BitUSD that offer greater leverage and have higher risk of black swan. It's even possible to have BitUSD without forced settlement and with annual global settlement. So the issuer has the ability to trigger a black swan event, black forced settlement of everyone if they enable that permission. A side effect of that is we now have built-in support for prediction markets. Let me say that again. We now support prediction markets. You create a bid asset that allows this issuer, which could be a multi-sig account with 30 people on it, to do global settlement after the event is known. The system will guarantee that there's always enough collateral to settle the global settlement, either way, whether it's true or false or anywhere in between. And because it's all privatized, there's a whole new way to make money on BitShares, which is to set up a website that sponsors prediction markets and get people to trade in those assets.
So this is stuff that token makers like Augur and things like that can come and actually utilize the BitShares blockchain essentially to create their prediction markets and piggyback on all of the huge amount of features that are going to be implemented in the 2.0 BitShares model.
That's correct. So a prediction market is created the same way as any other asset. Someone with a website advertises, hey, here's the prediction market. Buy this asset if you think an event's going to happen, or short this asset if you don't think it's going to happen. It's made particularly possible because you can have the prediction market priced in BitUSD, which means you don't have exposure to the cryptocurrency while you hold your position in the asset. And that's a major reason why prediction markets on blockchains haven't worked in the past, is because in addition to being exposed to event risk, does it happen or not, you're also exposed to currency risk.
So this is just making the entire thing more resilient.
Yes.
Which is huge. I mean, these are the my lord. Please go ahead. I'll just keep saying how huge this is. So please keep going. This is huge, guys. So do you foresee an influx of people like Augur and I know there's another coin that I'm missing here that have attempted this? Do you see what is the value proposition for them to just maybe share drop on their token holders and create their prediction markets here on BitShares?
We're trying to provide huge incentives for anyone with a coin to abandon their coin and move it to an asset on the BitShares platform. So I can provide a hint that there is one major altcoin that's going to be doing that sometime this summer.
Wow. So there's really big stuff coming, and you can't give too much more details, but my gosh, I want to ask so many more questions regarding that. So I'll just have to stop on it.